You're about to watch one of the most influential thinkers of the 21st century, the man who virtually founded the personal development and self-help industry, and in the process, transformed our understanding of the human mind. His name is Richard Bandler. As the co-creator of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, he's improved the lives of millions across the world through his seminars and self-help products. His works have been translated into over 20 languages, and his books, CDs and DVDs regularly top the self-help charts.
NLP is about getting the best procedure from the people who have succeeded the best at any task and teaching other people to do it. It's about having lessons that tell you how to design the inside of your head just like you would design the inside of a room.
Dr. Bandler personally trained to NLP Master Trainer level the internationally acclaimed lifestyle guru Paul McKenna. And motivational powerhouse Anthony Robbins freely acknowledges that NLP has influenced his own work.
I think the tools I've created are evolutionary in nature. We've never had a way to think about how we think. Being trained primarily as a physicist taught me to think in terms of how things work in systems. I used to design compiler systems, and that technology of teaching machines to do what humans did got me the idea that we could teach humans to do what other humans did by looking at the process, not the content.
Thanks to Dr. Bandler's mind training techniques, therapists, athletes, business people, writers, artists, musicians, teachers, entrepreneurs, negotiators, politicians, and countless others have become more successful and more effective at what they do. NLP has even inspired and been featured in TV hit series. Through NLP, millions have become assured and more self-confident, fostering a positive outlook on life that's freed them to achieve their goals and fulfill their ambitions. And because Richard Bandler teaches others the art and science of excellence, celebrities who excel at what they do are happy to work alongside him.
What I do is I teach people to think differently. You think differently, you feel differently, therefore what you can do expands.
Whether you want to become a master in communication, reach the pinnacle in your powers of persuasion with techniques that will leave everyone winners, or simply overcome a phobia and gain more confidence, watch now and understand how you can change your life forever with Richard Bandler and NLP. Creating and developing a successful business is the goal of every budding entrepreneur. And for over 25 years, Andrew Morris has been doing just that.
I started out selling shoes in Oxford Street, and retail was my first love, about selling and meeting customers. And from there I went into my family business, which my father established in '54, which serviced retail customers in shops and stores, selling them fixtures and fittings and design. From there I went into establishing the Business Design Centre, which is where we are now sitting. The very first trade and exhibition centre that the UK had ever seen, which opened in 1986 in Islington. I went on to own and manage Earl's Court and Olympia with private equity backers in '99, and in '04 we sold that business, and I then applied to run the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham as chief executive, which I did. And then a few years later started a pluralist life and career, which is work in progress.
So what is it that took Andrew to the top of his game? Richard Bandler uncovers the secrets of his success.
Part of this series, which is about success, is to take people who are successful and to try and see if we can pull some of what makes them geniuses out of their mind. How part of what the machine is in their brain that motivates them, the machine that makes decisions, the machine that learns from mistakes. Because as far as I can tell, successful people learn from their mistakes, and people who end up not so successful keep making the same ones. And these mechanisms, as far as I can tell, are not genetic. We've gone through the genome, and there isn't a good decision gene. And some people take their experience growing up, and I don't care how much college you have. It seems like the really brilliant people in fields, it's not based on their degree, it's not based on their education, it's based on what they do with their experience. What I'm hoping to do is to be able to ask him some questions and find some of these things out. Let me start out here, because I personally don't know a lot about you as a person. For our purposes here, the things that I read in your bio went through a series of developments. And one of the things is that you didn't just go through college and get an MBA and then go out and get a job as president of a company. That at a certain point in time you dropped out. They said you became involved in retail. They were artfully vague about what that means.
My first exposure to retail was at 14 years of age. I was still obviously at school. And I worked in the largest shoe store in the country, Lillian Skinner, opposite Bond Street Tube Station, not far from here. Thursday evenings and Saturdays. And I did it for pocket money with 3 or 4 other guys, and found that I liked selling. I found it very easy to communicate and to sell. I got a kick out of that. I liked earning money. And I got a bit of a bug for retail. And that led me into, in the very first stages of my career, dropping out, as you say, of college, and I'm working in Bond Street in a couturier selling ladies' fashion. And after about a year, my dad said to me, look, if you want to make retail your career, you're very serious about it, you need to study it. So what I did, which is quite unusual, is I went back to college. I went to the College for Distributive Trades in Leicester Square to study retail. And I found, although I was, throughout my whole life, I've been a really poor student, but having had a taste of work and life in the sharp end, I was a really good student, and I qualified with honours, and it was the ability to work and go back and enable me to apply what they're trying to teach me.
When you motivate yourself, do you have like an image of yourself being able to do something, and when you look at it, you're enticed by it, or what made you think you could go back to school and do it well?
I guess there was something in me that was a bit of a perfectionist. If I can't win or be one of the best, then I don't really want to play the game. Something probably in my gut pulls me towards it. It's like a bit of a magnet, pulling me or pushing me in that direction.
Okay.
And it's very difficult to break down and analyze what that is.
Well, let me pry a little bit and see if maybe you can, because I think you can. You're in order to be a perfectionist, you have to have some clear understanding of what to be pulled towards and what to push away from.
I'm actually, let me just reframe, I'm a pragmatist. I'll try and use a shortcut to get to where I need to, but I want to do it really well. I don't think that's perfection. I think it's pragmatism.
Okay, but you have to have some idea of what well will be, don't you? Okay, and see, you could either base what doing well is off of memories or off of some kind of construction in your mind. And so do you kind of have a vision of what doing well would be, and then you feel attracted towards it?
I think I've got a naturally creative mind that will work overtime at visualization. So I like diagrams and pictures, illustrative approach.
Okay, so
rather than necessarily a narrative one.
So instead of seeing a movie of yourself, you have diagrams or animation, or
no. Fun enough, the ego in me,
yes,
will probably create a movie of myself, or a book, or an interview by a well-known celebrity or whatever. So I would actually put myself in a position where I've arrived at whatever that place is in terms of what success looks like, which is around profile and ego. And then I will work out quite logically the steps I need to get there. And I remember at 16 or 14 or 15, walking to school or walking back from school in the dark, doing an interview with myself as if I'm some kind of great hero in the world of commerce and business, and creating, doodling a logo, an ABM logo, which is my initials, and what that would look like in terms of graphics and design, and something that looked solid and confident.
You sound like a little bit like not only do you go into the future and step backwards, but again, the devil is in the details. And as you said, you put a lot of details. You got down to the logo, even in your imagination. Whereas some people might go, gosh, I'd like to be a movie star, but they don't back up to all the things you have to do. They don't realize you have to memorize a script, you have to do this, you have to do all these things. You're walking down a dark street as a kid designing logos inside your mind. See, to me, this seems like a powerful structure to begin to teach people how to learn to be a great entrepreneur.
Leadership is more of an art than a science. Management is a science. And I think the issue is that leadership, which is really the ability to get people to go where you want them to go, feeling good about it. Everyone's got their own definitions, but mine's sort of around that. Is kind of what I'm trying to do today, is to train people to lead.
The word I would use is inspire.
Yep.
That some leaders inspire and some chase people with a stick. And, being able to inspire people isn't all you need. I know that being from America. You still have to have some of those details. But to me, that, persuasion, which is, as far as I'm concerned, I even wrote a book about persuasion, because I think persuasion can be engineered if you have the skill. But again, it's not just skill, it's also an art form. It's how you apply those skills.
I absolutely agree with you.
And so let me ask you a question. Can you think of one person you inspired?
Okay.
Okay. Now, when you met this person, were they inspired?
I didn't recognize them. They weren't in my radar because they were fairly distant from me in the organization I'm referring to. And this particular guy came to me and he shared with me for the first time that he felt I had leadership skills that were inspirational. But I had, at that stage of my career, no knowledge of that sort of, that influence or that power. And it was a bit of a wow moment for me.
Even though he was distant from you, once he pointed out that you had been inspirational, did you play backwards in your mind and figure out anything about how you had done that?
What happened was, he made me recognize what I refer to when I talk about leadership as the power of presence. Is that when you enter a room, the impact you have on other people. And that's kind of subtle stuff, but you don't recognize it yourself. They feel it, but you don't. And after that, this guy whose name was Matt made me aware of my presence in a way that I had not been aware of previously. And as a leader of an organization, I would describe it as like a spotlight following you around the organization the whole time. And the spotlight is everyone's eyes upon you. And I became aware of the responsibility that carries, which up to that point I had no cognizance of at all.
Given what you talked about before, my guess is that you would go into the future and start adjusting it so that you became better.
Correct.
Or, in your case, even the best at being inspirational.
I started to kind of fine-tune it, like a camera with a lens, and I'd try and get the picture absolutely clear, so that the power of presence became something that today I'm very, very aware of.
Okay. Did you get better at it as a result of that?
Yes, I think I did.
Okay, because see, there's strategies which are good to plan. You seems like you used the same one also to learn. That
I mean, what happened? It was a rare moment because leaders or people in positions of authority rarely get honest feedback. This guy, because I was going and because he admired what I'd done and perhaps the impact I'd had on him, gave me honest feedback. We don't get much of that. But when I got it, I tried to apply it.
what he's talking about is realizing that from the moment you walk in the door and everything that you do, that a light shines on you that's going to be reflected in how inspired and how motivated and the quality of the decisions of the people that work for you. And I think this is something a lot of entrepreneurs make big mistakes about, that they just come in cranky thinking about something else, and they don't realize when they walk across the floor of a factory, they're influencing everybody that's there.
And your story resonates with me because years later, my mood is generally fairly up. I'm not a moody guy. I don't lose my temper that much. When I do, you realize there's something really wrong. But generally, my mood is fairly up. And I wasn't aware that I was going through a period where I wasn't down, but I was really in my head, really analysing. And so when I'd come in, your story of walking across the factory floor, when I came into my office, this was at Earl's Court, and I would go through meet the reception people, go up in the lift, come to my office, So I'd meet a dozen people on the way, and it wasn't hi, good morning. It was. And after about 3 or 4 days of this, my finance director came to me and said, "I want to ask you a question. What's the problem?" And I said, "There was no problem." "Are we in trouble?" "No." "Well, what's going on with you?" And essentially what he had seen as the change in mood had alerted the organisation to a potential crisis or problem that I was not sharing. And again, it's back to that power of presence, that I hadn't noticed that my mood, which was subtly just a few degrees down, that was all it was, they had picked up on big time. And after that, I made damn sure that I kept that outwardly, the projection of positivity, of just being kind of the Andrew that they knew, because they relied on my consistency of the way I operated, in order to keep them feeling confident.
Yeah, most people don't calibrate internally. I think it's the job of an executive. Somebody like you has to be self-initiated. You have to have that target of where you're going and feel drawn toward and motivated. But most people that come in are calibrating off of the people around them. And most people, like I just recently had a group of 15 people, and I was asking what they wanted, and they kept saying, "I want to be more confident." And I kept saying, "How would you know when to be confident?" And they'd go, "When my dad approves of me, when my boss approves of me, if my friends approved of me, if people approved of me." And you could look at that as a lacking in people, or you can just realize that for a lot of people, they get their feedback from the outside. The extreme example is if this had gone further and they started telling people outside of Earl's Court, then the next thing you know, your stock is dropping.
Yeah.
And certainly when you're in a position of authority, you have to decide that everything you do influences everyone. Why don't we take a break and let them ask a few questions? Okay. What do you think?
Would you consider yourself to be successful? Or is it still something that you project into the future and that image constantly changes as you achieve your goals?
I wouldn't term myself successful, no, because around me there are many people that I would put in that category. I feel, I wouldn't say a constant feeling of insecurity, but the insecurity is around the ability to continue to do good work and to build. And I think that I coined a phrase years ago called encore anxiety. You do something great in your life at a particular moment in time, and you spend the rest of your life thinking, can you top that? And so I wouldn't categorize myself as successful. I think I've achieved a certain amount of success in the work I've done, but I don't regard myself as successful. It's not a way I would describe myself. The other thing that's always intrigued me around the word success and how it applies or not to myself is that whilst I've always used praise, lashings of praise, as a great tool to motivate people and appreciate and recognize people, it's like a blood transfusion to people to get praise, particularly publicly in front of their colleagues. When it's thrown on me, I cringe.
Well, you're motivated differently than other people. It's one of the things that sets you apart. Actually, I understand it. I become distrustful when people compliment me a lot because I have a very clear vision. In NLP, we call these strategies. Mm-hmm. Part of what propels you forward is seeking your own vision. Part of what propels other people forward is that they're seeking other people's approval. Madison Avenue's people told me one time, they said that 80% of the population makes buying decisions based on emulating something. And so so if you tell them they're going to be complimented if they buy this car, people will approve of them if they buy this car, that they buy the car because they're looking for the approval. And whether it works or not isn't, because it's too late after they bought it. Whereas with you, you've got a very precise image of where you're going. So if somebody compliments you, you already know you're not there yet. And so to you, it would be a distraction.
And the only approval I'm really seeking is my own. Mm-hmm. I know when I've done well, and I'll kind of internally say that to myself quite rarely. But when it comes from other people, I don't regard it as authentic.
Seeing Richard Bandler's ability Fascinating.
Have you had to take many kind of risks along your path, and do you have any kind of strategy to know when is an appropriate level of risk and how to sort of deal with that kind of situation?
Okay. The answer is absolutely. I have taken very many risks. I think at the time you're taking them, you're probably not calibrating them. Your perspective is slightly distorted. So you kind of just lunge in and go forward, and you look back on it later and think, kind of, how did I do that? Or maybe that was slightly irresponsible. I think as you go through life, your risk-taking reduces because you're more concerned about falling and failing and reputation. But you can also counter that by saying your experience also mitigates risk. You know where the dead are buried and where the minefields are, and you know how best to avoid them. So I would say, my risk-taking in my early career was pretty high, and my risk-taking more recently is pretty low. The first big stage of my life was entering the family business and trying to professionalize a family business of that post-war generation into a more contemporary commercial organization. And I left retail behind, but retailers became our customers, shops and stores.
And so you took a business and you projected what that business would be like if it was more successful.
I had the rare opportunity to get exposed outside of a family business. Is a pretty insular, quite isolated concerns culturally. And I had one or two opportunities to see how the wider world works. One of those was Hong Kong. I won a contract to do a chain of stores in Hong Kong, and went out there once a month for a year. I spent about a week there with large organizations, and it really opened my eyes to the way businesses should be run. I really understood what motivation was about, what incentives were about, and what a positive attitude was about. I remember arriving in Hong Kong with a shipment of our shop fitting equipment in the middle of the night, and the plans that we'd got for the store back in London, we got there and the store didn't recognise the plans. They'd constructed it differently, so our fixturing wouldn't fit. And there was a bunch of Chinese people there, one guy that spoke English, the supervisor, and I looked at him thinking, how are we going to overcome this? We had a team of guys that had been flown out to do it, very expensively, and I explained to him the problem. That wall had to come down, that wall had to come down, and he looked at me, and the two words that I again remember to this day was, I won't emulate the Chinese language, but was no problem. And we came back the next morning, and it was done. They'd thrown people at the problem, and it was no more. They'd literally broken down those walls. And that attitude, which of course in the UK, we're talking about, this was 80s in the UK, which was Thatcher's Britain, strikes, all the stuff that Thatcher tried to overturn. It really lit me up, this attitude of no problem.
So then what was the next big jump?
Through the Hong Kong experience and being exposed to their attitude to business, I started to introduce incentive schemes, performance measures and all that kind of stuff, which today we all take for granted, but back in the 80s weren't really that commonplace in the UK. They may have been in the States, I don't know.
We're still thinking it over.
Okay. and really worked out how you could get people to perform at a higher level and how you could impact on people's behaviour. And up until that point, it was kind of, everything was task-driven. We have to get from here to here in the quickest time. And no one looked at behavioural stuff. And it introduced me to that kind of approach to people. So I regard that as a really formative time. And a learning time for me. The bad student suddenly recognised that he could learn, in this particular case, by experience, by getting exposed to this stuff. And I then started to develop a bit of a thirst for business learning. And one of my great dreams was to go to Harvard Business School. I applied and I managed to get in. I went on a program called the OPM, the Owner President Management Program. You had to own your business to be part of it. And that I would put down, it was very enlightening to see guys like me from all over the world It taught me that one of my greatest fears, which is financial stuff, balance sheets, accounting, profit and loss, I broke that fear down because it was something I'd previously pushed over to somebody better than me, in this case my brother Jack, who was very financially literate, and started to understand the financial dynamics of an organisation. And I got the learning bug. I got the learning bug I took, from that point on, every opportunity for me was an opportunity to learn.
So the picture of who you were began to evolve because you believed it could.
I had the luxury, as you get in later life, of being able to cherry pick what I want to learn. At school, everything's force-fed to you,
That's true.
most of which you don't want to know. Later on, I said, these are the things I wanted to learn, and I went for those.
I have a concept in my mind that, what makes a good entrepreneur is that you vacuum nickels, that, that you watch where money can leak out of your business and make sure that it doesn't. And of course, if you can't look at the set of books, then you're severely restricted. But as you did this, it seems to me like a big jump to going, to becoming a learning machine, and then somehow or other you ended up at Earl's Court.
Okay. Well, what then happened is we opened a very innovative building in Islington in '86 called the Business Design Centre, an old 18th century livestock building called the Royal Agricultural Hall. And I was put in during a very cold winter. I remember working in a porter cabin in the freezing cold, trying to convince people to take space there, showroom space, because it was a trademark for design, and to sell exhibition space to companies that wanted to put on shows there. And so I started doing that, and we ended up making a really big success. It was the first from a small family business into an enterprise that had a big brand name, was highly innovative and incredibly successful. And suddenly I was exposed to media and interviews like this and many others, and went to my head a bit, I have to be honest. I thought I was a superstar because suddenly, it was a lot of attention. But the business went really well. And I then came across the Academy for Chief Executives and became a member, an organisation which today I now own and run, 25 years later, and found that it taught me the soft skills. I had good commercial skills. I knew how to make a buck, but I didn't really know how to motivate people. And what the Academy taught me was the more subtle skills of how you really mobilize people. And then I recognized that if I could build a great team around me, my desk would be clear, my head would be clear to think the strategy forward and look at vision. And so my next stage of my life was really around building great teams. And right up until the present day, that's what I continue to do. I am a big picture guy. I like the detail. I like a certain obsessive detail, like graphics and design, which I talked about earlier. But generally speaking, I look at the big picture, the big building blocks to take us from here to there, and how we can deliver that through putting around me great people. And I'm very proud of the fact that in all my moves of career, I've left behind me very good succession. The businesses didn't miss a beat in me leaving, because I put in place good people, and particularly one good person in every case, where I'd kind of hand them the keys and I would move on. And I think there are some CEOs who love to see businesses they leave fail. The next guy didn't quite do it the way I did it. My personal fulfillment is seeing them thrive after I've left. And in every case I've managed to achieve that. It's because of succession planning.
In NLP terminology, when we talk about strategies, that your ability to adjust your strategy from being a good salesman to being a good persuader to being able to change your goal of what you would be, and even the fact that part of your plan includes that a business would survive, that you'd have it in top. And I mean, your picture has gotten bigger and bigger as time has gone along. That, if you only go as far as seeing yourself run a business, right, and you don't think about what happens afterwards after you sell it or pass it on or incorporate it or whatever it takes, when the plan ends, of course, it just goes into limbo. And, if you trust that the next person come along has the same kind of vision that you do without training them to do it, wouldn't be there. So in essence, you're kind of a mini neurolinguistic programmer. Not only did you develop great mental skills, you're installing them in the people you leave behind, or at least selecting people with similar planning skills to you so that these businesses survive.
Planning is, even again, back to my musing with myself at 14 and 15 about my life and my career, I'd always planned my life in kind of 5 or 10 year tranches. I'd worked out at 20 where I would be, where I'd be at 30, where I'd be at 40, and so forth. And I'd always had loosely, not a plan, but a vision of where I would be at the end of that decade. And I found it really useful just kind of to move towards that and hopefully try and exceed it if I was able to. But I've always been a kind of long-term planner.
You guys have any other questions?
I find it very interesting that Andrew had this forward projection of where he wanted to be at these intervals in his life, which is really great. And many people may have, and he planned towards that. And many people
planned from that. He didn't plan towards it. He planned from it. Those are different. He went into the future and said this is where he wanted to be, and then methodically moved backwards. The story you've been hearing is of a man who has constantly improved his lot in life and taken advantage of every opportunity, whether it was from his family, from here, or from there. A lot of entrepreneurs, if they were successful and came across an organization where they were training CEOs, would have gone and just walked right by it and go, I already know how to run a business. He went in and found out that he could inspire people better. And, it's that craving, that the hunger to be better at what you do to fulfill that vision. It's, a lot of people could see themselves being successful, but they don't back up and say, what am I going to have to do to get there?
So how would you, from a strategic point of view, get someone from actually having all the desire but not being able to plan or make the steps or have the actual resilience to go through the low times, to not be put off by the fact that they've taken a risk, it's rebounded badly on them, that they stay on track?
I don't care who you are, there's going to be things that don't work as well as others. It's not that every step is going to be success. Yeah. But you see, you have to have that thing like a homing pigeon does. The wind blows you off course and you just keep going back. Because, it doesn't say his target doesn't say that it won't be hard to get there. It doesn't say there won't be ups and downs and that won't be mistakes. I mean, the difference between an intelligent person and a stupid person is that they learn from the mistakes. If you make a mistake and you get a bad feeling and you just keep spinning it in your body, that's a really poor strategy for success. It's a great strategy, to not get things done. But, if you get a bad feeling, you have to spin it the other way and go back and look at the picture and then make new steps about how to get there. Remember, he didn't just pick steps that he thought would work. He's looking for the most pragmatic way to get there, which means if something's not working, he's going to adjust those steps. Yeah. It's not like this plan stays intact. This is a self-adjusting plan at all times. He constantly goes back to the goal and steps backwards. And if he steps in a hole, then he's going to go back and find a quicker way to get there. It's not just about having a plan and following it blindly. That's not what this man is describing to us. And he's a good example of what should be taught at the school he's running, about what makes a good entrepreneur. Even when an employee walked up and said something that he did that was important to him, his ears opened up and went, man, this is important. It struck him, and as soon as it did, it became incorporated in the bigger picture of how he would treat everybody. If this little bit of success can be multiplied, so can a little bit of failure. It's a question of, as he says, where you shine the spotlight on. See, NLP is about taking the best of what people do. If we can take the best of his learning strategy and adopt part of it, it'll make all of us better people. But you see, if that picture isn't enticing enough that you really feel driven and drawn towards it, then you need to adjust the picture till it is, until you can see yourself and really feel drawn towards it. If we learn nothing else from NLP and from this man right here, Andrew, we should learn that. We should learn the Andrew propulsion system, because that will take us all, and no matter what your business is, whether it's making shoes or selling hot dogs, that this isn't about the content of his life, it's about the structure of his mind. The way he's thinking about this works, and it's worked in multiple businesses and multiple situations. It worked with small numbers and is working with humongous numbers now. And that's That's the lesson you can get from it.
Today was great because I actually saw two successful people, tell their stories in a way. Andrew Morris, I mean, it's really entertaining stuff, and I'm sure people will get a lot out of it. And the way that the usage of NLP was to actually sort of unpack how Andrew is successful was really fascinating.
Because you've talked about having a very clear vision and a very strong vision, and if you've experienced doubt about that vision and what resources you would have drawn on to overcome that doubt and to evaluate whether it's an internal doubt or whether it is actually something to be taken account for. And in that question, if I can squeeze in as well, if you've had doubts in relation to having too many options.
I have constant doubts about the journey, the route, but not the destination. I spend a lot of time at the outset visualizing that destination, as we've talked about, and putting color on that and almost expressing how it feels when I get there. But clearly the tactics to arrive need to be recalibrated as you go through it. Outside factors that you don't control, the weather, the economy, you have no control over. So you have to constantly recalibrating. It's like a satellite navigation system. You keep looking for different route options. So it's always about bobbing and weaving to get there, but not in the. If you spend enough time on visualizing the destination and why you want to go there and what that looks like and feels like, then it's just an issue of how you can actually get there. The doubt is around the tactics to get there, not where you want to arrive. I will not spend too much time on process or research because ultimately you never get started if you do that. So you work out the touch points around any project or campaign or whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And there are certain touch points, certain critical issues that need to be in place in order for you to succeed. But if you then, as is often trained today in business, work out the processes and the research, you will never get started. So I'm quite cynical around that because research can prove anything. And process can suffocate your energy. So I've been much more about looking at, say, the critical, the KPIs of any particular project, work out the key building blocks to get there, and then the rest will sort itself out along the way.
I thought it was very interesting, and I felt very privileged to take part of Andrew B. Morris's story of success and to learn how he has come such a long way and the ways that he has used to be so successful.
I've modeled loads of successful people, and they all seem to have some things in common. And one of them is they worry a lot, but only about how to bob and weave, not whether to start. And they make a, they get an idea, and very often they exceed that idea. But most of them, the idea is powerful enough that even if they only get part of the way there, they're way ahead of everybody else. One of the things he learned, which makes it easier now, is to have the right people in the right place to do that. When you surround yourself with the right team to accomplish something, it's a lot easier.
Richard, having found out the kind of strategy that someone like Andrew would use for success, how would you go about kind of teaching that or sort of installing that, to use that term, in someone else who didn't already have that strategy?
To me, part of strategy installation, to learn to think like another person, means you need to practice it with something small. And because, you see, this strategy just doesn't run over 5 years and with the big projects. It was reflected in the smallest thing when he told us about leaving school and going to this place and thinking I could sell shoes. Right? And then when he saw people doing shoes, he kept adjusting what a good salesman was, so he became better at it. So I would find out what the person does in their life, whether it's cook lunch or anything else, and then have them go into the future and see themselves exceeding what they believe they can do. Because, see, once you exceed what you believe you can do in your mind, then you can change what you can believe. And so I would take small things and have them run through the steps. I would ask Andrew more detailed questions about the size. But see, to me, I watched his hands, because when he talked about one time in his life that the picture was this big, and then he kept saying, I'm the big picture guy, which tells us these are big pictures, which is part of why he feels really drawn towards them. By the way, this is identical to how Kurt Vonnegut writes science fiction stories. Kurt Vonnegut goes into the future in his books, and he even describes it in one of his books perfectly, like he was a neuro-linguistic programmer. He goes, what I do is I go into the future to some absolutely unbelievable reality. I'm the last president of the United States, sitting in the Empire State Building surrounded by candlesticks. And then what he does is he jumps to the beginning of the story, which is now, and writes something that logically leads to it. And you see, if what you don't believe you can do, you simply imagine it till you desire it, and then back up logically to where you are, it starts to tell you what the steps are. But you make that picture big enough, try stepping in it, and it feels like exactly what you want, then you become mesmerized by it. It lines up all your neurology to head towards it. And that's what makes people good learning machines. It's the difference between being a follower and a leader. Leaders have vision in the future, and they're drawn towards it. And followers go, that's a great vision you have. I'll be right behind you. If you teach people let me ask you this. Do you feel you've learned anything being here this morning?
I believe so. I hadn't been able to put into words the essence of what I do. And when you asked me that when we sat down, I couldn't really articulate it. But the way you've described it, the visioning, stepping back, and the pragmatic building blocks towards it, yeah, that's what I do again and again. So it's helped me to understand that process far better, yes. To young entrepreneurs starting out for the first time, I think there are a number of ingredients that you need to put in place. Belief in yourself and your product or your service, but also the ability through an iterative process to refine and develop the essence of what you do. Thirdly, to get out there in the marketplace, speak to as many people as you possibly can. It helps you refine your product, it networks, and it creates opportunities and opens doors. And along the way, to recognize that in most cases, the successful entrepreneurs are those that have done what they're doing better than anybody else. So keep refining, keep polishing, keep innovating, and set above all else your target of being the very best at what you do, and you will succeed.
Hopefully the lesson we can all learn from here today is that the secrets of success don't have to stay secrets. And that, you want to make bigger pictures in your head and, and have a little less self-doubt and all of those things. This is a guy you can learn from, because certainly from where you started selling shoes to the things you're doing now are multi-million dollars apart. And when they said, "Are you successful?" you went, "Not finished yet." I like that about you. I'm not finished yet either. And I don't think any of you should be either.